Okay, we're live.
Alrighty, folks. So we are going to get started in just a few minutes to allow for a few more participants to roll on in. But happy Friday, everyone. My name is Deanna, and I'm the University Recruiting Associate with Uncubed.
I'm Tarek, folks. I'm going to be guiding us through today's webinar on remote work. If you have any questions, there's a little chat and a Q&A. You can jump right on in here. We're not going to do any polls or the like. I know it's the last day of spring break for some of you all, so we'll just kind of cut right to it. The most important thing here really is that we're going to have a recording once all said and done so that you can share amongst your friends, and then we'll share more broadly amongst our community. But happy Friday. We're going to get started in maybe 2 minutes or so. So I'll just go on mute in the interim, let a few more people join, and then we'll get going. All right, folks, we'll get started here. So this is what I'm going to do. My name is Tarek Pertu. I am the co-founder and chief creative officer of Uncubed. I hope everyone is doing okay considering the circumstances. I know it remains a new normal for everybody. It's only going to continue down that path of trying to find new ways of learning, new ways of job seeking, and then just new ways of living our lives amidst a little bit of the chaos. At Uncubed, we are changing some things on our end to hopefully have more resources for you. We've done some webinars. Hopefully you're plugged into the webinar series that Deanna leads here on our end. This is a little bit of an impromptu one that we spun up last minute. I do a little bit of a talk around remote work for those that are new to Uncubed, and I've created a presentation on it. So we thought, why don't we just deliver that presentation to students? We'll record it, and then we'll send it out to universities. Even if a lot of people aren't actually able to join us, which is not a big deal. But I hope you do get something out of it. I think what we've learned on our end is that it's not just candidates that are trying to figure out what life looks like going forward, but there are millions of companies around the world right now that have moved their teams remote and are trying to make the most sense of it. So for those of you that pay close attention, take some notes, we'll make it available, but there'll be a little bit of an advantage for folks that have some familiarity around remote work. You should expect, for those of you that are starting a full-time career post-graduation, for those of you that are in your last year in school, that you very well might be joining a remote team, and that just has certain things tied to it. And so what I'm going to do, hopefully, is just bring you up to speed on what it really even means in the first place, some of the behaviors that we expect from employees at Uncubed, and some best practices, and hopefully you'll take that away with you and make good use of it. Of course, if you have any questions, ask away. Deanna will be monitoring that. And same here. If you want to jump into the chat and just let us know where you are dialing in from. I'm currently here in Brooklyn at my apartment in Brooklyn Heights. So quarantined here, doing the best I can. And let us know where you're from. But what I'll do here is I will go ahead and share my screen here, and then Deanna, just let me know if this is coming through correctly on your end, so that I'll feel confident that everybody else is seeing it as well.
Yep, we are all set.
All set. Cool. If anything's not coming in properly, or if you're not hearing me well, just leave a question, and we'll do our best to answer it. So this is a beginner's guide, and the interesting thing about a beginner's guide is that it's probably an expert's guide. Also, there's not too many different things. I think once you are fully embedded in a remote environment, then you'll probably have exposure to some unique tools that you wouldn't otherwise, and of course you can develop some expertise there. But yeah, I think for all intents and purposes, it should work out just fine. Let's go on through it here. So first, we'll just start on what are the different ways of work. So you might not have actually had an opportunity to educate yourself, on the different definitions. So here, hopefully, we'll be able to jump into it and help. There's a traditional way of work, and that is co-located work. That essentially means everybody's together in a place. That can either mean a single location, which for most startups, that would be the case. And let me close my window here so you don't hear too much background noise. This is remote life. People were living it right here. And there's multi-site. That basically just means a company that has multiple locations, right? You have two or more co-located groups in a separate location. Probably not that important to define it, but what your parents and your grandparents are probably familiar with would be they would have gone to work at one location for the majority of their career. Many will continue to even after this, and then some, of course, are part of larger multinational corporations or just companies that have offices in different areas of the country. But we're here to talk about remote work, and what that means essentially is it's any full-time, part-time, or any work in general that someone is doing from outside a company's office, if they have an office. If there's no office, then it's essentially just someone working on their job, from their home or anywhere they want to work. There's a term "work from anywhere." That's really what we often say. It's like just you work from anywhere. It doesn't mean you're working home or you're working on a remote island, as attractive as that might be. Fully remote, another term you might hear is distributed work. And that's essentially that all employees are in. Hang on 1 second. Let me just move this. There we go. Sorry. All employees are working from separate places, right? So Uncubed right now, we are a fully distributed team, fully remote. Everybody works from different homes. Deanna's at her home. I'm at my home. We've got people in, recently, although they've come home from the virus, in Colombia. We have a team out. We have a person on the team out in Portland. So we've we are a fully distributed team. Remote first is another phrase you might hear. That is essentially where all of the company's policies and processes they lead from a remote standpoint, but there could still be a location or multiple locations where different members of the team might show up to. You might have a small office. I put a star next to it because up until recently, Uncubed is remote first. We have an office in downtown Manhattan. Folks show up to it every once in a while, but we are a remote first company. All our meetings are video based, and for the most part, everyone's working in a separate location. If there's a takeaway with remote first, it's that communication happens online, right? That's the majority of it. And then you have satellite workers, and that essentially means you have an HQ where a number of the team actually goes to work every day, but a few of your members work remotely in different offices, and the company is set up for that. And what's as a satellite office, if you will. So now I want to explain why we went remote, because why we went remote was not a product of necessity as much as a product of choice. And I think that probably will give you better insights into the value of going remote than maybe hearing why people went remote because they had no choice, which is what so many companies are dealing with now. And I'm just going to take this slide by slide. One, it's cheaper for everyone. For the organization, the overhead goes down. Certainly, rent overhead goes way down if you're able to just operate a team remotely at the individual level. That should hopefully mean that you don't need to pay for monthly commuting expenses. Whether that's if you're in a big city, that would be obviously a subway card, or if you're commuting in from the burbs, if you will, that would be some sort of transit card. You don't have to pay, for those of you that would otherwise have to show up at work in a suit and a tie. You no longer need to spend money on an outfit. right? Those days for me are long gone, thank God. I had God knows how many suits. I thought I had whittled down to enough, which is 3, and that's probably 3 too many, to be honest. And then you don't have to go out of the office and pay for, $10, $15 lunches every day, right? You can essentially cook. How nice. This is probably the thing companies hope happens the most, and that is that you are finding greater productivity because you're able to choose your hours a little bit. For myself, for instance, I'm probably less productive super early in the morning, more productive towards back half of the day and into the evening. Fine, that's great for me, great for the company because I can get a lot of good work done. If your productive hours are earlier in the morning, which many people do favor, great, and you're not restricted by a certain clock in clock out mentality that might restrict some of those productive hours. And it also allows you to create these new healthy routines. So for me, I have a morning routine. It's maybe an hour long. It includes reading, it includes yoga, it includes some Ayurvedic nutrition practices, since my wife is an Ayurvedic practitioner, and I do all of that before I even start work. And remote work allows me to do that. I sort of mentioned this earlier. There's no commute, and I think you'll find if there was ever a study done on what the biggest stressor is for people living in New York, it's probably the commute. Commute can be quite stressful. This is flexibility for a little personal time. So if you want to get a workout done in the middle of the day, if you want to tidy up the house, because you don't often get an opportunity to do that. If you want to spend more time, like in my case with my daughter, you can pick certain pockets of the day to do that, where of course, if you show up at an office every day, that's just off the table entirely. Healthier food options, at least that can be the case. It won't necessarily always be the case if you're a snack factory like I am. I just kind of, anytime I feel slightly in need of a distraction, unfortunately, I go right for the snack cabinet. So that's not great, but generally speaking, I can have a more healthy lifestyle. Another great opportunity is you have more autonomy. You don't have someone breathing over your shoulder every day, less group decisions, right? Because you can't just jump over to someone's desk and ask for their opinion, and you can't just assemble a quick meeting. Of course you can online, just a little bit more difficult to do that when people aren't right next to you and you can kind of get a feeler for them. That has its benefits, obviously, and we'll probably speak a little bit to that. But generally it forces you to make decisions on your own, and that autonomy hopefully leads to greater rewards for you professionally. This sounds maybe like I put this in incorrectly. But as much as there can be room for greater distractions, which we'll talk about, if you design it effectively for yourself, there should be less distractions, easier to find quiet time, not have people kind of come up to you, especially with what had been the work environment up until now was an open work environment with startups. That's where the trend went, to an open work environment. We can tell you from experience, it can be extremely distracting, just in terms of finding difficult opportunity for deep work and really focusing on the things you do. And so anyway, opportunities for deep work, finding more quiet time, that's great. There should be a period there, not a comma, but that's because this was part of one sheet before, not separated out. I think this is the last part of this one, right? Yeah. So, and we're using the same tools. I mean, before we went remote, we were already using Google Docs very heavily. We were already relying on Google Hangout for many of the meetings that we were having with clients and customers. We were already using InVision for design, Trello for keeping track of our to-dos and processes. And of course, everyone should be familiar with Slack at this point. That's pretty much the go-to communication tool for companies, whether you're remote or not. And then there's other sort of skill-specific software like GitHub for engineers, Canva for designers, Splash for those that are organizing events or those that are on the marketing team. We use all the same ones. Nothing's changed since we went remote. We use the same tools, and you will too. Now there's some, I think, as I mentioned earlier, there might be some more advanced tools specifically for remote. Maybe the HR teams deal with that in particular, but for the most part, I think you'll find you use the same tools. Certain things will change, like how you interview people and what have you, but we're not going to go into that for this one. So here's some of the challenges, some of the hurdles that you will need to overcome. Again, if you're new to your career, I think a benefit here might be that you haven't been really conditioned heavily on an in-work environment, which means all of your behaviors over years and years of working at an office have been conditioned to be optimized around that environment. You, as a student, you don't have that. You're not going to have to deal with that challenge. You can essentially jump right into remote work. Of course, you're going to balance some of these challenges early on, but you're going to be conditioned on how to work remotely, which will be good so long as this trend remains, and working remote or working from anywhere is the way most of us continue to work. Of course, if we jump right back into an office environment, you might be up for a steep learning curve. Loneliness, right? This is one of the major challenges. It's the loneliness that's the killer. That's one of my favorite lines from Seal. But you want to try to build maybe meetings and some personal time into your schedule, and that might mean with work. So finding an opportunity to interact with your coworkers online. A company that we work closely with called ZX Ventures. They're part of Anheuser-Busch, the ABI InBev group, and they've had to go remote as a result of the coronavirus. And every Thursday, the whole team gets together in a giant Zoom channel. They provide Drizzly credits. Drizzly's I believe it's like you can get beer and wine delivered to your door, but they get Drizzly credits so that everybody has a drink together at Thursday, because that's what the company used to do in person. For me, every Friday now, I actually do a call with my college friends. So we do a Zoom call collectively as a group, and that's just a good way of staying in touch with people outside of work. So anyway, find a way to bring people together. If your company's not doing it, then just go out of your way, even as a newbie in an organization, to say like, hey, I'd love to have like a coffee chat with you, and make it work for you. And this is where distractions lands on the challenging side of things, right? If you are used to working at an office every day, then it is going to be a little bit tricky or trickier for you to work from home and not be distracted by some of the temptations that might be in anyone's particular home. I don't have cable TV, so that's not a big distraction for me, but it could be a distraction for somebody else. So think of those things. What are the distractions in your house? You might have family around, like I do with my daughter. That is a distraction at times, and I have to manage that intelligently, because I want a child that feels her father's love even when I'm working, and so I have to balance that. But there are other distractions that'll find their way into your life, and you have to manage it. Do some mental exercises on what that might look like for you. Becoming sedentary, right? This is actually a big risk right now with the current state of everything with the coronavirus. Is that people are obviously encouraged not to leave their house, and when you live in New York in a relatively small space, it's tough to stay active. And so you can get very unhealthy very quickly because you're not being active. So figure out a way of getting out of your house daily once normal life resumes. Get your membership to a gym. Sign up for classes that force you to get out of the house, or find a way to bike to and from somewhere, whatever it might be. Really focus on not just getting into a really bad routine of never leaving your desk. I have been in that routine. I continue to fail at that at times. That's part of the reason I built a very important morning routine for myself that involves yoga, involves movement, so that if I have a very busy day, I'm not just staying at my desk all the time throughout the whole day. I've actually built something that's gotten me active at some point in that day. For me personally, part of the reason I like to schedule meetings, often in-person meetings, with our customers and clients, because it forces me to get out of the house. So that's a trick. Get out of the house, book meetings, whatever it takes to get out and about. More challenges, communication. This is a big one. You can't just tap someone on the shoulder and get clarification around something, right? You have to actually be very, very, very intentional about your communication efforts. And there are going to be great opportunities to do that. Not so many as if you were in an office, presumably. And video, I put this in here intentionally. Video is still a tool most optimized for one-on-one communication. It is getting better. It is going to get way better, way faster now by necessity, because of the epidemic we're dealing with. But that is a challenge, right? Is having multiple people on a call and people knowing when they can contribute their their thoughts or not, because usually when you're in a group meeting, you can kind of feed off of body language and someone can jump right in and say something, and it's a little bit more difficult when you're remote. Obviously, and when you're actually developing, you lose that paired programming benefit that many companies implement, and so you'll have to figure out how to do that remote. No problem. People have been doing it. You'll just have to get used to that. Time zone challenges, of course, this is a tricky one, especially if people want to clock in and clock out at a particular time based on the schedule that befits them. If there's someone that's in desperate need of something and they're way ahead of time, they might just have to wait. That also has its benefits, of course, because your workday gets expanded, and for the business, you can get a whole lot more done if people are kind of operating in a 24-hour cycle because they live all over the world. But obviously, if you really need someone and it's 3 a.m., you're not going to have an opportunity to just tap them on the shoulder and get answers to it. Another challenge for me personally is being present in meetings. I am a big time multitasker. I've been my whole life. I'm the type of person that was doing my homework in period 8 for my period 7 class in high school. That was like, it's hard for me to be glued in a meeting and not be thinking, there's something I can accomplish, but that is part of the challenge I need to overcome, and certainly something you would need to overcome so that people feel your presence in a meeting. And so work on that. And then writing things down. This is something I recently added, but it comes up very frequently, is you will be documenting things more frequently. Don't just kind of shake your head and say, I got it. Like, write things down, document it. You might want to have a pretty robust Google Doc experience for yourself personally if the company doesn't have it, so that you're just keeping track of what's coming out of all of your meetings and non-meetings, right? Just documenting down things anyway, because whatever work you might be doing, people aren't having the same type of transparency and exposure to the work that you're doing. So you might feel, and this goes right into this one, accountability. You might feel people don't appreciate the work you're doing. And so documenting it is going to be very helpful for you. We use Slack. We have every day at 5 o'clock, we all get pinged to just jot in the kind of major accomplishments for the day that we've each individually worked on, so that if your manager needs to do a quick scroll to see if you've tackled some of the bigger priorities, great. And they should align back to what the weekly goals are, and that rolls into company's quarterly goals and then the annual goals. But for us, we keep track of our individual to-dos in Trello, and then those are our 3 to 5 major accomplishments we hope to achieve in a week. And then our daily Slack request asks us to basically just chime in on what we did that day, that hopefully rolls up to those major weekly to-dos. Anyway, like I said, you can be insecure as a remote worker that people aren't appreciating the work you do. So that means, like, go out of your way. You need to take ownership of your work, and you need to communicate what you're doing so that people aren't wondering, what the hell is Tarek doing? He hasn't chimed in recently. Is he actually getting things done? Well, that's, take ownership of that. Get that done. This kind of goes back to communication. If there's an emergency, the website's down, or like a customer had like a major issue and it requires, 5 different departments to jump in on, that all hands on deck, like, opportunity. You can't just like make an announcement at the office, assemble everybody into a major conference room and say, hey, code red, we got to solve this problem. So you have to figure out how to do that in a remote environment. And if someone's calling a code red and you're not available, that's going to be hard on the company and hard on you professionally. So just keep that in mind. It becomes a little bit more challenging when an emergency pops up. 2 more here. Security, pay attention to this, folks. If you're working, a lot of organizations that are going to hire you operate on extremely secure lines. And when you go remote and you pop into your local coffee shop, your machine becomes infinitely more vulnerable. And that can be very dangerous to an organization. So here's a statistic here, is that 62% of all Wi-Fi related security incidents happens in coffee shops. There you go. So you need to step up your password and security game. We use a remote VPN so that we can, just add one more layer of security. Dual auth authentication into your emails and other sensitive programs is important. So keep that in mind. And again, don't just wait for your employer to suggest this. Get ahead. Let them know that, hey, don't worry, I'm already set up for remote. I'm set up. I know how to handle this. I know how to, keep things nice and secure. And then if you, as an organization, a challenge is managing an international workforce, because that means different laws by region, different laws by country and cities, dealing with, obviously a country and the sensitive matters around a particular country's employment law. You have to be, as a company, you have to be very familiar with that, especially if you have contractors or you have essentially an international workforce, right? If you are mostly operating out of the US, but you hire this amazing, engineer out of France, they have completely different employment laws, and you just need to make sure you're paying attention to that. Of course, in the US, state by state, there's different laws. Got to pay attention to it. Some rookie mistakes to be mindful of. This will give a couple of you a laugh, I hope. I don't really have an audience to know if anyone's laughing, but some of these are funny, but they can happen. I put these all on one slide. Don't forget that you're sharing your screen. These are things that are happening right now somewhere around the world. Somebody forgot they're sharing their screen, and they've switched over to Twitter, and they're leaving a very nasty comment to someone on Twitter or something. And the whole world that's still checking it sees it. And how can this happen often? Well, it's likely not going to happen to me right now because I'm the presenter. But let's say like someone's doing, we do a Q&A and I keep my screen shared and I forget about it. Or in Google Hangouts, it's much easier. And so people are just chatting amongst themselves and I just start browsing the web. So just be mindful of that. Don't forget to go on mute. That's obviously quite important. There are funny stories of where somebody jumps off and uses the bathroom and they are not on mute. So here it goes. You wear your ear pods and jump in to use the bathroom. You forget to go off mute. So these things have happened. And it is funny in some ways and it's not so funny in other ways. And another one, of course, is that if you get started and you're waiting for people to join and you're in a private conversation with someone that you might be with, whether it's a family member or let's say you are in a co-working space and you're actually physically with someone and you're having a private conversation, you forget that you forget to go on mute. You could be sharing some sensitive information. So be mindful of that. Last but not least, don't forget that your camera's on. This is where the no pants perk becomes professionally damaging. The no pants perk is that, if you don't want to wear pants, you don't necessarily have to if this is all you see every single day because you're logging in. But the reality is you might just jump up and jump out of your seat for any particular reason. I almost did to turn the fan off. And although I'm wearing pants, I'm wearing shorts. And I thought, well, if I'm not wearing my very professional work gear, which, for a technology company is going to be a t-shirt, I probably don't want people to see that. So just be mindful of that. If your screen is on, that, people can see everything. And a lot of people, you might forget that. So I think if you're somewhat new to this, even if you're not new to this, you'll make these mistakes, but maybe have a little checklist. Am I on mute? Is my camera on or off? If it's on, and people are, bantering, can people still see my screen? Just be mindful of that. This is just a funny quote that I pulled from a remote work guide. Is my dog barking to answer questions that were really intended for me? This is a remote worker when asking embarrassing remote work stories. This will happen all the time. It's already happened in multiple meetings this week in our own company where dogs are barking in the background, kids are crying, right? Everybody's homeschooling their kids right now amidst the crisis. And these things are going to happen. I'm sure there's going to be worse embarrassing remote work stories. Hopefully you, viewer, doesn't have one that's too bad to share. All right, this will be the last major section here, but defining basically a guide to successful remote work. And so this is how you, new to your life as a remote employee, how can you be the best version of yourself as a remote employee? One, buy-in, right? As an organization, it is important that everybody is bought into remote work because if it fails with one or two people, it can fail drastically for everyone. That means that if someone's not totally bought in, they're going to be distracted during meetings, and it just starts to have this ripple effect. You will feel this in an organization. You will likely work at a company where things aren't always going well, and people start to get disheartened, and they don't care as much, and that just, it's a cascading effect, right? So buy-in is important. Availability, right? Making sure that you are setting aside a particular chunk of your day where everybody can feel confident that they're available, like trying to find that happy overlap, especially with different time zones, so that when critical meetings surface, everybody's there and what have you. So we call it core work hours, right? So being available during core is important. During core work hours is important. Otherwise, you want to, you can design the rest of your day around your particular peak productivity hours. Yep, that made sense. And then take advantage of it, obviously, but be there during core hours. Developing routines, very useful routines. This is important. I had mentioned my morning routine being very useful for me. As an organization, every Monday is kind of our meeting day. So we have our team meeting in the morning. Then we break out into our individual teams to have 30-minute or hour-long meetings there. And then every Thursday we do a check-in, and everybody kind of goes down their Trello list to see how they're doing with their tasks. And then Friday we all get together and celebrate wins. This is a very important weekly routine for us as a business. And then your individual contributions can, finding routines there is also useful. I publish an email every single Thursday. It's our HR newsletter. It's written by me. It's very personal. I write it every single Thursday, and that cadence is very useful to me. And I try to build cadences throughout the week that, make me more productive and keeps me sane. Boundaries, right? Defining boundaries. As you join a company for the first time, especially if you're joining a company where they are not really schooled in remote work, they can encroach on you. They can basically, those boundaries can get blurred very easily. And it's important for you to set that precedent early as well. Take ownership of your career. But as an organization, collectively, your goal is to help respect everybody's boundaries, and hopefully they help set their own. So developing dedicated space for you as an individual, having a dedicated workspace is part of boundary building. This is where I show up for work. It's hopefully respected by anyone that might live with you. And when you are there, you're working, and those boundaries, should keep you productive, with family or friends that might be around. And work boundaries, right? After hours, with coworkers, just know that if it can wait. Don't dig into someone's after hours unless it's an emergency or business critical. Another tip for being productive is to build in breaks into your day. I had mentioned that I start with like a very, important routine. I try to schedule meetings with people so that I can get out of the house. My wife, who works remote, she does a much better job of building actual breaks into her day. So she actually leaves the house and she goes on a walk. She goes over to the park so she can be on the grass for a bit. And then again, if you are really efficient at this, you can build in opportunities to see friends and family that you don't otherwise have an opportunity to do. So once a month you go see mom, or a couple times a month you go see mom if she's, more than an hour away or what have you. And, you can do your work over there. And with friends that live near you and you don't get to see, you can schedule lunches or breakfasts or coffees with them. And that's really one of the best parts about taking advantage of remote work is, you can have these great personal benefits, but build them into your work day so that you're breaking from the monotony of maybe never leaving your computer, which, by the way, is important when you're at an office also, is that you're getting away. It's just easier when you're in a shared space with people to kind of break off from someone and go for a walk, for a coffee, or go into a conference room or have lunch together. And it's just more difficult when you work from home. Setting very defined goals. This is something that pops up often when I hear some of our customers who are dealing with remote work, is that, like, how do I know if people are getting their work done? We typically when you had a team on the same floor and the same pod, and you kind of knew what everybody was doing, and you had your team goals and everybody was working towards it, great. But now I think it's important that you are part of a team that creates structure at the individual level, and you to set very specific individual goals that are transparent and available for your manager and the broader team to know that these are the things that I'm working on that are leading towards the broader business goals. Create them specific, make them very well defined. You don't want to say stuff like, reach out to companies for sales leads, or things that are maybe hard to necessarily achieve, like close 15 deals today. Well, that's tough because a lot goes into closing a deal. So you might say something like, advance 5 enterprise clients into this stage. You've got a specific number 5. That's what you want to hit. It aligns with the company's goals, and you're advancing it, right? You're not necessarily doing the most difficult task of, let's say, closing a deal, which has so many different parts, but you're advancing something. That's just like a sales tip, but you can do that. That would be more relevant to sales, but if you're doing, design, or you're, engineering, setting specific goals about what you're delivering and when is what we're talking about here. You want to make sure that you're confident that those goals are aligned with the companies and that they're specific. Before we get into a couple of tips, last big one here is communication. Overly communicate, write things down. I mentioned this before. Take ownership of your career in a remote environment and ask yourself, does my manager, are they aware of what I'm doing? Are they aware of what I've accomplished? Or maybe more important, I'm behind on something. Are they aware I'm behind on it? The answer is likely no. So if you're behind on something, you vocalize it, ask for help, say you've got a blocker, and have people jump in and help. It's very easy for assumptions to kick in a remote culture. So do not assume that people have access to information. They're worried about their role. They're worried about accomplishing their tasks. And they're not necessarily like looking up from their computer and diving into the work that you're supposed to be doing. You've got a question, and this is just basically Slack etiquette. If you have a question that multiple people can answer, bring everyone together in a Slack group, rather than maybe pinging everybody with individual messages saying, hey, do you know what time that webinar is on Saturday? And then you have 5 different people looking up that information for you, where if you put everybody into a group and say, hey, does anybody have an answer to when this webinar is scheduled for Saturday? If someone quickly comes in with the answer, everybody else knows they don't have to go searching for it. So just keep that in mind. Something we call cave mode, and that's when you don't want any distractions. I'm not going to even be checking Slack, right? So if you've got a message for me on Slack, just note I'm in cave mode. Notify people on Slack that you're about to go dark because you need to do some deep work for a while. I often go dark when I write my Thursday email because it takes me anywhere from 2 to 5 hours to write every Thursday. And so I go into cave mode, and I'm not always the best at communicating that, but that's typically means it's going to be a little harder to get in touch with me. So, you might, maybe you'll have to figure out a way of breaking my concentration if it's an emergency, like sending me a text or something, but otherwise know that cave mode can be sacred for people. I'd mentioned this a little bit, but we use Trello for tracking everybody's individual tasks. I use it separately from the team to track my own to-dos. So how many meetings, like if I had a meeting that day, I log it into Trello. I then have I then make sure I'm following up with my meetings. All of that is kept in Trello. So, because you can create these functional checklists. So if I have a meeting with Anheuser-Busch, I log that I had that meeting. Then I have a separate card called follow-up where I immediately put Anheuser-Busch. So I know I have to follow up with them, and I can check it off once I do that. If I've chatted with someone and said, great, let's schedule a meeting, I log them into a card for schedule meetings, and then I know whether or not I've actually successfully scheduled a meeting with somebody. And that's for me personally, because that helps with my business development workflow. Everybody's going to have a different one, but for me, it's extremely useful to have a personal one. So consider that. When you're interviewing new prospects, for us as a company, it's our job to make sure that they are remote ready. For your job as a candidate, your job is to present yourself as remote ready. And hopefully this document helps there. And I mentioned this in one way or another about just writing everything down. Record meetings that are important. Because there will be times where not everybody is part of the meeting, and you can just quickly send them a recording and say, here, get yourself up to speed on what we talked about. It's very useful. So just know, is a meeting important? If so, hit the record button. Couple tips here. One is create an environment in your remote office that makes you smile every time you step in. It could be a picture of someone that you love, or a pet that you love. It could be, you could sit down at your office and do a FaceTime call with someone that you care about for 5 minutes before you start, and you look forward to going to your desk every day because of that. Or maybe it's just the way you have it tidied up, but maybe there's a map, a beautiful map, on the wall that reminds you of the great places you've been in. Something that makes you smile. That's just a nice tip. And then this is really important for the company, and I'll just share it. I figured I would just share this anyway. But for us, we need to know that everybody is different. So everybody operates different. They operate at different times of the day. They operate with different levels of management. Some people need more management than others. Some people want more autonomy than others. There is no, one size fits all, and it's up to the organization to be mindful of that. And they are going to respond to different levels of management quite differently. So anyway, why do you want to make sure that you're paying attention to people's individual needs? Because then you know that their needs are met, especially in a remote environment. It also will help you inform when meetings are required versus when they're not required. One thing that we've discussed is a monthly stipend to get people out of their house and into a coffee shop or a co-work environment. These are things that we've considered as a company, or helping invest in, a new, set of headphones or something that just makes the work office environment better. And everybody's going to approach that environment with different needs. And so as an organization, it's not, hey, everybody gets a set of headphones. Well, what if I've got a killer set of headphones? You're not paying attention to my individual needs. And we live in a world now where, we are more mindful of people and who they are as individuals. That wasn't always the case for our grandparents. I'm sure they'll tell you the stories. Okay, these are more best practices when communicating remotely. For us as an organization, it's about reinforcing that mission. What are we achieving as an organization? We're not in the office every day getting excited by everybody's energy. So when you show up at work every day, why are you here at Uncubed, and reinforcing that mission? Strict door policy. This is, if you need to be in a meeting, you must be there. It is critical that you're there. That's one of the perks of being remote, is that you take these things extremely seriously. Be there with your camera on, right? You're there, camera's on, ready to roll. I already sort of mentioned this, FaceTime. When you're dialing in, we want to see the video, right? It's, if there's 10 people in a meeting and 2 people have their video off, why? Why is it off? Are you cooking dinner? Are you distracted? You might not be, you might just not like how you look, but you got to get over that very quickly with remote work, because FaceTime is very important. I'm guilty of this. I am a big multitasker. I communicate with a lot of our customers via text message also. So, and quick response is very important in my line of work. So there's often times we're in a meeting and I'm kind of distracted because I've got text messages coming in. That's not good for those others that are in the meeting. I'm not respecting that. So if I need to answer it, try to do it before the meeting. Try to predict the type of communication that might happen during a meeting. Get out in front of it, or have it wait until after the meeting. But if it's an emergency, leave the meeting and take care of it, so that you're not distracted while you're there. I already kind of mentioned this. When you're remote, everything's digital first. Capture everything. And so if you're about to head into a meeting, have an agenda, take notes, share it with those that it needs to be shared with. Again, do your best to capture everything. As an organization, these are just tips. Is this concept of a sprint format for key business priorities, is, setting certain deadlines. A lot of remote teams work well there. So, hey, we've got a 2-week sprint or a 3-week sprint or a 6-week sprint. This is what we're mobilizing to accomplish. All of our weekly and daily tasks are going to be aligned to achieve the goals within that sprint. Not everybody's going to do that, but these are just company best practices that we want to share. One thing that's important for us is getting to know everyone on the team. Every single Monday, we start the week by asking a relatively personal question of the whole team. It could be something like, what's your favorite board game? It could be, how do you like to spend your weekends? Or it could be more personal, like, tell us who your siblings are and what they do for a living. And it's just a way of getting to know people better. And we've learned that we've gotten to know our coworkers better since we've gone remote, because we've made it intentional to actually get to know people better. So hopefully, if you're working in an organization, they have a way of getting to know each other, on a more personal level better. And then, so long as we're not dealt a pandemic blow that keeps us locked in our house and not seeing people, and I'm sure people are going to jump on this one immediately once we get the go ahead, is schedule in-person meetings with coworkers when you have an opportunity to. And if that particular meeting involves maybe someone that can't be there, you have to just make sure that there is always a Zoom or video link available for anyone that can't be there with you. So when you can schedule in-person meetings, do it. Find a meeting space in the city, or if you do have an office that is available, go there. But if make sure there's always a video link available in case someone needs to jump in. All right, that's just a little tip. I mentioned this earlier. Friday, is our win celebration day. What wins did we have for the week? That's really important. It's fun. It's the great way to end the week. We start the week by getting to know people. We end the week by celebrating wins. It's, for us, it's been a pretty good cadence. And I think taking the time every single week to make sure you are acknowledging wins is very important in a remote work environment. It's important in a regular work environment as well. But again, communication, being more intentional, is just important with remote work, right? For accountability's sake and for just feeling like you're part of something and part of the community. We haven't really implemented this in a big way just yet, but something that you could do is taking part of a day, a month or a quarter or a full day a quarter, just to let people brainstorm and come up with ideas, so that, again, the monotony that can get into one's work life, whether you're in person or not, the company is being diligent about breaking that in some way and letting people be a little bit more creative on certain days. And one of the big benefits of going remote is that you're allowing people to just be flex their creative muscle personally more, seeing more people, building interesting routines that are not confined to work hours at a location, and allow them to maybe flex that creative muscle on a professional basis also goes in line with that, right? Trying to keep people happy here, people. The benefit, by the way, of remote companies is they see less turnover. That's going to change now that every company is going to be remote soon. But generally speaking, people are happier when they are at an organization that is remote. Here's a tip. Don't rely on a single video conference tool, right? Right now, we are doing this via Zoom. We take a number of meetings via Zoom. I take most of my meetings via Google Hangout, but they don't always work. And sometimes one is just painfully underperforming for whatever reason, and it's good to have have something there to switch. And this we got from a company that I admire. A friend of mine runs here in the city, and what they do is, if people are ever late to meetings, you got to donate $1 to their team Venmo jar, and at the end of the month or the quarter, all the money that was donated from people being late to meetings or not showing up at all goes to basically a pizza party or something like that. So that's just something that companies can do. We implemented this. We're probably do a relatively bad job of making sure everybody's doing it. I certainly have donated my fair share, but it's a fun little thing that you can incorporate into the culture of the business. This is it, folks. This is the last part, but this is just us as a business, and I'm sharing it because that might be what you walk into, and you can have a little bit of a dry run in terms of what company might do. Our goal is that the executives meet quarterly in person. And if it's a small team, you could probably do a quarterly team in person. We've thought about doing meetings in New York, since the majority of our team are in New York. But for now, most of our in-person meetings are quarterly. We do an annual team-wide. A lot of companies call this a retreat. One company to follow called TaxJar has a pretty cool, it's called their Jar Fest. I think that's their annual retreat. They've got some cool videos on it. But that's when the whole team comes together for a week, a year, and does great work together, but also celebrates life and each other, and it can be quite nice. And then there's ways of people getting together on specific team. Doesn't have to be company led, right? People can say, look, I'm going to organize a separate trip for my particular team to get together, and that could be annual or quarterly. If it makes sense, have monthly meetings. Again, you'll find in a remote team, you're probably not going to have a lot of meetings, but if your particular team would benefit from it, and most of them are in the same location, if not everybody, get together, right? Get together, say the last Friday of every month, we're going to get together at a breather space. We have a dial-in link for anyone that can't be there, and we're going to just brainstorm and whiteboard some ideas. Awesome. Take it upon yourself to do that. And, or just meet, be impromptu about it. The idea is we have some strict in-person meetings. We've got, our quarterly executive, we've got our annual team meetings. But other than that, if and when people can get together, we certainly encourage it. I think one thing to keep in mind about a remote company doesn't mean everything always has to be remote. I think for the most part, organizations do encourage people finding time to get together. You should do it. And then we'll wrap with this great little quote here. But this, trust me, from someone that is, I've been working in a non-remote environment for a long time, and now for the past year in a remote environment. And even actually before that, we did a couple days a week work from anywhere at Uncubed. So we're familiar with it. But I love this quote: iteration is easier remote, innovation is easier in person. I find that to be very true. It's so important to have an open canvas like a whiteboard to just get together in a group and just think about ways of innovating a particular product feature or business overall, whatever it might be. It's like we need to come together, and in-person meetings facilitate that. When you need it, like the team needs to be mobilized. They've already got their marching orders, for lack of a better phrase. You know what you're working towards. You've got your individual goals at a weekly, quarterly, weekly, and daily level. Remote is just great for iterating and moving through sprints quickly and reaching that innovative goal that you've created in person. And so innovating in person and then iterating remote, good efficient function. And that is it, folks. That is the majority of this presentation. Some of the external stuff are really just not documented here. I didn't think were necessary, but this will make available as a video. You can watch it later if you'd like. And if you have any questions, certainly reach out to Deanna or hopefully myself on LinkedIn. Sometimes it's a little tricky for me to navigate the avalanche of emails I have and messages. But I will do my best. And if you're at a school that feels like they could use some more remote tips or tips for their students, have them reach out. We will certainly be here to help. And again, at an individual level, we've done a lot of work over the years of just helping people whenever we have an opportunity to. And if you have an idea that you'd like us to build into a webinar, please share that, and we will, we'll do the best we can. So I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm not going to manufacture any for you. I won't waste your time, but please reach out if you need anything. Uncubed's here to help. Again, we're very familiar with remote work. We help companies with their own remote work needs, and we have just launched on our job boards an opportunity to actually search jobs by remote. So if you're actually particularly excited by that, check out the job board and look for remote jobs. And I think that's it. All good, Deanna?
Yeah, I think we're all good. Thank you guys so much for joining in and listening. Definitely dropped some gems here. And again, we will be sharing the recording and we'll be posting to our YouTube. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and have a good weekend, guys.
Yeah, everybody. Take care.